So let's talk about trying to set up non-ring models. Anything that doesn't have a finger rail, the software considers to be a non-ring model. So the first thing I want to pull out is the piece that we want to use, and we're actually going to look at doing this piece three different ways, because there's a lot of options you have depending on the wax you want to use, depending on what's most important to get cut. So let's go ahead and turn these gems off, and I've got my piece laid out here in this direction with my supports on each end, because I want to do this in a round solid wax. And but notice in this view here it's not centered up, so I'm going to go ahead and just quick center this whole thing up using utilities and center object. Okay. Alright, it's always a good idea to have that centered up first. Then we're going to go into the builder, put the model in, and since it doesn't see that finger rail out there, obviously, it's going to give me the non-ring model options. I'm going to grab both supports with shift and throw those into the supports box, and it's going to hand over the strategy that it figures it can use with the model orientation and the supports laid out the way they are. And so it tells me that this should be the best way to do this job, and that's great. So that's exactly what I was thinking of. It tells me 22mm round solid. Sounds good. So I'm going to click next, and we'll just leave it on that size. We're going to obviously use the 3-jaw chuck for this. And the option I have, the only option I have for doing it in this strategy is 4 sides around. So every 90 degrees it's going to come in and cut out everything that it can. So let's just see what it does. All right, there we have it. You can see the tool pathing came in every 90 degrees. And so we're going to go into here, and we're just going to click on each subpart to see what's going on. Obviously we have from the top down it's cutting, and it's always going to cut automatically 1mm past center. So that's a good idea, or a good reason rather, to center up that model before we even go into the builder. That way it's going to overlap in its tool pathing from the top and from the bottom. So we're sure to get all the detail and clean out the inside of those bezels. And then from each side, it's going to do the same thing, 1mm past center. So 2 and 4 are going to clean that out from those directions. So that's one way to get it done. Probably a very feasible one. Probably the first option I would consider doing, because the only place we would have to clean up this piece in the end is literally on each little end here. Okay? Alright, so let's throw this away. Let's talk about if I wanted to do this same setup, but rather I did not have it orientated the same way. I had it orientated vertically in the looking down view. We're going to turn those gems off. And let's just go ahead and say, well, we've got the supports in there just like we want, and we try to go in and set it up the same way. Let's see what it does. Okay, non-ring model. We're going to throw the supports in just like before. And it's going to say manual supports not recognized. Please manually select the milling setup, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with getting this message if you know the strategy that you want to use, and you know you can pull it off with the wax that you've got available. But in this case, let's say I'm still thinking of using that round solid. If I do, it says no wax fits this part. It simply means that it's looking for the model to always be laid down in the looking down view horizontally. Because if you think of the axes of the mill, the A axes over on the right side of that viewport, the tube of the wax should be coming out this direction. So it's looking for that same orientation, and even if you could fit the part in that tube of wax, the supports would still not let it happen. Okay, it still would need to be, with the support set up that way, it would still need to be laid down this way. All right, so just food for thought there. So let's go back, and so we did it one way. We laid it out in a round solid with our supports on each end. That's one way to get this job done. Let's talk about doing it a couple different ways other than that. So let's pull this back out. I have supports now on the bottom of my piece. Now obviously when I'm done milling, I'm going to be able to get a lot of information and detail cut except from the bottom. So that's where the cleanup is mainly going to be. But let's see what we can do with this. We'll go into the builder. We'll throw that in. And I'm going to tell it the supports that I'm using here I want to be on the bottom. So it's going to hand over doing this piece at the end of a round solid piece of wax. Okay? So just like this, the little yellow pieces here would be these supports. So it's actually going to be laid out on the end of that piece of wax. Okay, so that sounds like a good option. It's suggesting a 33 millimeter round solid. So let's click next. We'll just leave it on the 33. And here's where I get a lot of options for this particular support setup. I could do the top and then from 4 sides around, so each side and then each end would also be cut. But because of this one bezel down here and the filigree on it, I'm thinking that the 8 sides plus top would be the best. Not only is it going to get the 4 sides we talked about plus the top, it's also going to hit this piece from every 45-degree angle going around. So it's going to be able to get a little more detail on it for us. This last one would be the cutting from the top, but also as it rotates around on the A-axis, it would simply cut everything it could straight down on top. Not an ideal piece, obviously, because this is not a cylindrical object, so probably not going to benefit us too much. But we're going to try the 8 sides plus top. All right, let's see what this does. Okay, here it is. We've got not only from the top down, but we've got where it's going to cut 8 times around the sides. So let's see what we have. Okay, obviously it's going to do top down, and it is going to do some automatic roughing passes for us. Then on the next one, we have quite a few subparts here. Okay, but it's going to get from one side, it's going to do a 45-degree angle, and it's just going to simply go around and get everything that it can, which is great because when we get down to this end with this bezel, it's going to be able to get in to areas it would not be able to get into any other way. So those 45s on this end is really, really useful. So that's another way to get this piece done. Let's look at the last way. It's somewhat similar to this. Let's pull it back out and clean slate here. With our supports on the bottom, I've got the model centered up on F4 there, and I'm going to go into the builder, throw it in, get those supports in there. And here again, because those supports are on the bottom of the piece, it's going to hand over as a default, milling it in the end of the round solid. But say I want to use it in, or get this milled in flat wax, I could click on this, and it's still going to accept it. It's still feasible, and you can tell by the image that that's still going to work. All right, so now it's telling us the thickness should be about 10 millimeters, no less than that. So we're just going to leave it on that. And the benefit of doing it in a flat wax is it's going to get the top and both sides, and it's going to be able to also tilt it and do 45-degree angles from the top to get a little more detail. Now you're not going to be able to get the ends, so that's something to consider. But this might be beneficial if it's more of a concern of getting some of this detail inside these pieces here from the top. So let's see what we have there. 5 sides at edge, and see what we get. Okay, I figured out the cutout curve for us. Let's take a look at all these. Okay, there's our cutout curve in the top part of the flat wax there to remove excess material. And then we go down into part 2. We have all these different subparts. Of course, we have the top down, which in this case, this is not quite far enough. Okay, it's going just down into the top of the bezels a little bit. So let's change that. Let's open up subpart 1, go to View Depth, click on that, and it's going to show us the cutting plane that we have here that's actually hidden most of the time as it generates these toolpaths. But I'm going to click on Go to activate that plane, and you get these little arrows that allow us, if you grab the double arrow there, just to drop that plane down, and you can see the representation of the cutter so that that cutter can get down far enough and cut out everything that we need to remove there. Okay. If I press enter, it's going to set that down. And let's just go ahead and take a quick look at some of these other toolpaths that have been generated before we remake it. Okay, gets it from each side. That's fine. It's overlapping the center line, 1 millimeter on each side. That's good. And then it's also, the last couple parts here, is going to angle and get in at 45-degree angles. So that's really nice. Gets a lot of detail that way. Okay. So since we did change the depth on one of those subparts, we're going to have to hit Make Path again. Okay, so it regenerates everything for us. We had to remake all of them simply because we had changed the depth of subpart 1 as it cut from the top down. So let's just make sure we have what we think we have here. Yep, now the top down is going all the way down through the middle inside bezels there. And the rest should be exactly the same as they were before. So here again, 3 different ways to mill this piece. It all depends on the detail that it's most important to you to get cut out. Is it the 45-degree angles here from coming in from the top on both sides? Is it cutting around 8 times around the sides plus the top? It just depends on what you're going for. Or is simply cutting every 90 degrees around this piece and having it supported on each end is sufficient for you. They each have their drawbacks simply on where you have to clean it up and the time involved.